Voting is underway in Britain, with Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer on a course for landslide victory. Opinion polls indicate that Starmer could win a House of Commons majority of more than 200. SABC News correspondent Stuart is standing by for us with the latest. Good afternoon, Stuart. Take us through how the day started, and have Britons come out to vote in their numbers, and what is going to be likely the most important factor that they will consider as they put their mark on the ballot.
Well, the polling opened at 7 a.m. here, so it's been going on for a few hours already and will continue late into the night. Being summer, it means it will largely be light for all of that. Despite that, there are fears about turnout, concerns that with it expected and being mentioned so frequently in the British press about a Labour majority being almost guaranteed, will people turn out to vote when they think the outcome is already set? It's a concern that's been expressed by both the Labour Party leader Keir Starmer, who is concerned Labour voters might be complacent, but it's also a concern amongst the Conservative Party, with the Prime Minister and Conservative Party leader Rishi Sunak worried that people will assume the Conservatives have already lost and therefore there's no point in voting for them either. So this past week has been there's been a real focus from both party leaders in trying to mobilise people to vote, to make sure that no vote for a particular party is missed. So voter turnout in the UK is largely around 60 to 70% on average, but it's expected it will be a little less than that, which could provide an upset in the polls if things are much closer than people expected, with some surprises possible. We'll find out about those later in the evening. Very early on Friday morning, we'll start to see the results come in, and we might know as early as Friday morning who the next Prime Minister for the next 5 years will be. But as you suggested, all polls pointing to a Labour Party majority, which would mean Keir Starmer, the Labour Party leader, being the next Prime Minister. As to what people are thinking about here, there was some interesting polling earlier in the week about to what extent people are voting to get the Conservative Party out as opposed to voting for the Labour Party's policies. And they found that around 50% of voters who are not voting Conservative are doing so just to get the Conservative Party out. 15% just say they want change. Only 5% say they're actually voting in favour of the Labour Party's policies. But it's a huge turnaround, especially compared to the last election in 2019, when Labour suffered its worst defeat in 85 years. Now it could achieve a historic win.
Given that a lot of countries this year are going to the polls, we've just come from the polls ourselves, and the issue of youth voting becomes one of importance talking point. What do the youth in Britain think about the political direction?
There are a number of programmes here in the UK designed to counter exactly that, to try to mobilise the youth vote, with from election to election young people in general turning out less. I said earlier around 60 to 70% on average is the UK turnout. Young people tends to be around 50%. These organisations though say there's no lack of interest in politics from young people. It's just many of them don't understand how it directly connects to their lives. When they do turn out, and we've been speaking to young people about what they're voting for. Here in London, it is largely Labour and Green Party support. That's quite standard amongst younger people. But there's also an interesting development when it comes to UK politics, with more young people, especially young men, voting for the right-wing Reform Party. They say that Reform seems to offer them a better outcome when it comes to their political priorities, although largely, just like the rest of the population, not so interested in voting for the Conservative Party. Consider that an 18-year-old voting today will have only known the Conservative government for all of their life.
For the rest of the other people who are voting, the issue of the economy and the cost of living also takes quite a big precedence and becomes very important when one goes to the polls. What are the Britons saying? What is the word on the street about particularly the finances of the country?
Yeah, the cost of living crisis, as it's been dubbed here, how expensive it is to just survive and spend on basic things like food and rent. It's something that the Conservative Party has been hit by. Some of it is the geopolitical reality, the COVID-19 pandemic and inflation, but the Conservatives have suffered the blame for that. And while Rishi Sunak made promises to improve the situation by the time the election came around, most of those have not been fulfilled, which is at the forefront of voters' minds. They also consider the fact that the Conservatives Conservative Party has been in power for 14 years, and so largely when it comes to economic policy, it's hard for them to deflect the blame to anyone else. The Labour Party is trying to position itself as a more stable party, one that will provide economic security and will help bring down bills. And it's also very much hitting hard on the NHS, the healthcare situation in the UK, which is another major issue for British voters, with many people feeling the Conservatives have not lived up to their promises when it comes to reducing waiting times and providing more resources to the National Health Service.
Stuart, thank you so much for your time. I've been speaking to SABC News correspondent Stuart Smith. He's out in London where the Britons are currently voting.